Okay, we're going to return to news out of Yellowknife now. And joining me on the wildfires is the mayor out of Yellowknife, Mayor Rebecca Alty. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. Talk to us about the current conditions there right now. How are crews doing?
Well, we had a bit of a moment to celebrate yesterday because the fire's been deemed held, which means that there's enough resources and enough suppression effort underway right now that they don't forecast that the fire will grow beyond its current boundary. So that's good news, because now that the fire is in that state, we're able to start our reentry plan or our welcome home to residents plan. And there's about 5 phases in a reentry plan. So phase one is the fire has to be deemed, well, shouldn't say safe because the fire is still there, but it's being held. Phase two is to determine if you had any loss of critical infrastructure, say, your water treatment plant burnt down or your hospital burnt down. And that didn't happen in our case, so that's good news as well. So now we're on to phase three, which means we've started calling critical staff back. So, for example, water and sewer, territorial government started to call the hospital staff back. And then we're reaching out to critical businesses like the grocery stores, gas stations, to get them to start bringing their employees back. Once all those employees are back and those services are up, then we get to move on to, that would be phase four, is setting all those services up. Then we'd be moving on to phase five, which is welcoming residents home. So I know it's good news that the fire is held and good news that we're on to phase three is calling people back. But unfortunately, we don't have a date yet for calling all residents home.
Mm-hmm.
So just need a bit more time and patience from residents in that regard. But I think the good news is that we're able to do those first steps of the plan to welcome people back.
Talk to us about why it's so critical to do it in that phased approach. I mean, this is incredibly thought out that you're bringing back those people, water, sewer, the grocery store employees, the gas station employees, bringing them back first.
Yeah, because the community right now really scaled back. So the hospital right now is set up, I think it's one doctor, one nurse, and two paramedics. So it's a hospital set up for the 1,000 essential workers. When we have 20,000 people back and that hospital is not ready, then we could run into an issue. I think of my friend who's pregnant and due in September or October down in Edmonton right now, evacuated there. She would want to be one of the last people back to make sure that the hospital is set up and ready if she needs it. We want to make sure that there's enough food for everybody. So it's important that we do it in phases so that for folks who are living in the shelters, we want to make sure that the shelters are open before folks come home. So there's a lot of planning and a lot to think through of what needs to be put in place in order for just core and basic. It's the city's not going to be 100% up and running before residents come home, but it will have some core basic needs.
It can be hard, I know, to put a timeline on this, but how many people are we talking in this approach? Like, how long do you think it might be, perhaps, before you start welcoming, other people back?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges right now is yesterday we made the announcement at 4 p.m. Fires held in the Yellowknife area. Unfortunately, the fires in the southern part of our territory are not held, and they're quite active and quite dangerous. So they've actually shut the one highway down that folks could get from Alberta back up to Yellowknife. So as much as we're calling people back, now the highway's been shut down. So we've got to wait for the highway to reopen so that folks can come back. So it will take a bit of time to see when the highway's reopened, and it is a bit of a journey. If the closest part, somebody might be in Edmonton, that's an 18-hour drive back to Yellowknife, and if you have kids, sometimes that has to take 2 days. So it's going to take a bit of time. We were optimistic, hoping 5 days, but it might take a bit more, particularly with the highway conditions now.
And how are the services for those people who have been out of their home now for, beyond a week, if not weeks for some of them, and now looking like it could be another week for some people if you're not on that sort of critical employee list. So how are services for those people being handled?
Yeah, so there are the evacuation reception centers that have been set up in Alberta. So there's 7 in Alberta, 1 in Manitoba. And then of course others are staying with friends and family, but it's challenging staying in a hotel for 2 weeks, 3 weeks with little ones, or just by yourself. So yeah, definitely hear a lot from folks that they're stressed out and want to come home. And that's where with this phase plan, it's not going to be perfect. We're balancing urgency with safety, and it will be the basic services needed, but not perfect, because we know how much folks need to come home.
I can imagine that you're focused right now on bringing everyone back home safely, and there will be a time to look at what could have been done better. But I'm sure there's already something perhaps top of mind that perhaps you're saying could have been done better with this evacuation approach, or really needs to be looked at in terms of evacuating people safely.
Yeah, definitely. We need to do a full review, both municipal, territorial, federal, NGOs, and I want feedback from residents too of like, how the process was so that we can improve. We've had an incident response team. They're called Canada Task Force 2, come in and provide support to our staff to work through this emergency, and I would say I've been able to sleep better at night ever since they've been here, because they're such a wealth of knowledge. They worked on the Slave Lake fire, they worked on the Fort Mac fire, they worked on the Calgary flood. So they come in with so much experience and lots of templates and tools. And even if you have those in your plan, they've got a lot of the the on the ground stuff that we didn't think of we thought of having food for employees, but we'd left the sandwiches on the table for the day because we were all in a rush, and they just walked in and were like, "Oh, food safety, we've got to focus on that. We don't want to have anybody knocked out because of that." So that team's been really invaluable to provide advice and their experience through the time, and our plan's going to be way more robust with these templates and plans going forward.
Okay, Rebecca Alty, Mayor of Yellowknife, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time today.
Not a problem.